Hello and welcome to State of the Economy, a show that connects you with key policymakers and thinkers. Today we have with us former Finance Minister Yashwant Sinha. In fact, he's been Finance Minister twice, who will speak to us on the state of the economy, on how to revive growth, on the key issues that are before us on the eve of the union budget, which will be presented in mid-March. Welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you.
I will start with this basic question as to, if you were finance minister today, what are the 2-3 things that will seriously worry you, and how will you address them?
You see, the most important thing which will worry me is the fiscal deficit that the government is now running for the last 3-4 years, and the complete lack of expenditure management. This country cannot live with 6% fiscal deficit of the central government and another 4% of the
A combined deficit of over 9%. Yeah.
over 9%. So that would have been my first worry. The second worry would have been the current account deficit. Because if you run a large fiscal deficit, it's bound to get reflected in your current account deficit, and that's what's happening at the moment. And the third is, sentiment. Sentiment is guiding the economy today. All modern economies are subject to sentiment. The sentiment of the consumer, the sentiment of the investor, the sentiment of the saver. All these sentiments are down. And
Why are the sentiments down, sir? This is a serious problem.
the sentiment is down because of the overall political, economic environment in which we are living today. You can't have this kind of a situation where the government is unable to take decisions. The first 5 years of the UPA was the blame was put on the left parties. In the second incarnation, they are blaming everybody else except themselves, including the opposition, for instance. Now, that is something which does not wash with people, with investors. They want the government to function. And economy is something which cannot grow with a non-functional government. That is what is happening, and that's the reason why sentiment is down. So sentiment is a guiding factor in today's economy.
So there's one perception that you're right when you say sentiment is down. There's one perception which is held by even the industry, that this sentiment is worsened by a lack of clear majority that the UPA has on certain issues where some of their own allies are also not cooperating with them, and also the fact that the main opposition party BJP is not fully cooperating with them on bipartisan issues like financial sector legislations, etc. And you are the chairman of standing committees. Where are these legislations headed, and how will the opposition party and the ruling UPA sit together and resolve on moving forward on some of these key legislative reforms?
I am very glad that you have asked me this question, because this is something which has been agitating me, and I have often expressed myself through articles in newspapers on this issue. Now, I will give you an example. Take the pension reform bill. It was started in our time. We were and are committed to pension reforms. In fact, the new pension policy was introduced with effect from 1/4/2004, when we were still in power. In the monsoon session of Parliament, when the pension bill was sought to be introduced, the BJP supported the introduction because the left parties had called for a division, and the Congress did not have the numbers. If we had not on the spot decided to vote for the government, the bill would not even have been introduced. Okay. Now, in 2000, after 2004, when this government brought the bill, referred it to the standing committee, I was not chairman then, I was a member, and I worked hard to evolve a consensus. I can tell you frankly that there were some Congress party members of the standing committee who were opposed to this legislation. But then we were able to work out some kind of a consensus. The report was submitted, and for years the government did not have the courage to examine the report and bring the bill back to Parliament for the simple reason that it would have annoyed the left parties who were supporting the government, and they didn't want to take that risk.
Yeah.
BJP had offered to support it even then, but our support didn't matter. It was spurned. Now, finally when it was brought and the standing committee quickly gave its report, it should have been brought in the winter session. We had informal discussions with the finance minister. We had some concerns. He said he'll take those concerns on board, and we said we'll support the bill. Then Trinamool Congress decided to oppose it, and then again history was repeated, and they have so far refused to bring the bill back to Parliament. Now, how do you help in a situation like this? And I quote you chapter and verse, give you examples of number of bills in which they have acted like this. Take Companies Bill, for instance. It's a major piece of legislation. We in the standing committee gave our report in August 2010. And then the government kept examining it, and finally brought a new piece of legislation in the winter session of Parliament, last session. Okay. And at that stage, you examine the report of the standing committee, you can even bring a new bill because there are many amendments. And but what they did was, they consulted and included in the list of amendments suggestions from other stakeholders. And we said, now this is not done, then it will have to go back to the standing committee.
Sir, what is it about the Companies Bill? I have been seeing this bill undergoing a full amendment from Narasimha Rao's time, from 1993 onwards.
There were a number of important amendments in our time.
Several committees, your time. But why doesn't this bill finally come, fructify? Why doesn't this come to the fore?
No, I'm just telling you that the government got a concept paper prepared. The government then appointed the Irani committee, which submitted its report. And all this was happening in 2004-5, and then the government kept examining all the concept paper, the Irani committee report. It was put on the web. They received suggestions. Those suggestions were examined. Finally, they put together a bill, a new bill, and that came to the standing committee. We worked hard on it, and we gave our report, as I told you, in August of 2010. Just imagine. And then the government takes all of 15 months, 16 months to finalize the bill again.
There's a feeling that there are a lot of industry lobbies, which some lobby or the other, they keep objecting to some parts or the other, thereby getting this delayed. Is that, could that be one of the reasons?
Could be the reason. Could be the reason.
Yeah. So here we'll take a small break. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with former Finance Minister, Mr. Yashwant Sinha, on various issues relating to the forthcoming union budget and other reforms, economic reforms. Sir, we were on legislative, important economic legislations which for various reasons have been taking inordinately long to fructify. Now I will come to one or two other key legislations which even you as Finance Minister had seriously worked upon. One is the insurance legislation which seeks to increase the foreign investment limit. I am told that within the standing committee now there seems to be a consensus not to hike FDI limits beyond what exists today. And so the other involves very important legislations relating to further expanding or opening of the banking sector. Now I remember you as Finance Minister, you were the first to take that seminal decision to enable government stake in banks to be brought down to 33% without losing the government losing control at all, with their public sector character being fully retained. Now, some of these issues, where are they today? Do you think it's possible to bring back some of these issues on the table, or politically is it difficult to do it today?
No, it's for the the judgment will have to be made by the government. If the allies of the government are not with the government on some of the reform measures, then you can go through the formality of introducing a bill in Parliament, referring it to the standing committee giving its report, and then the matters remain dormant there. That is what I was telling you about some of the bills. Now, you mentioned insurance. On insurance, there was a consensus, an overwhelming consensus in the committee that the government and the others had not been able to convincingly make their case for increasing equity, foreign direct investment from 26% to 49%. And therefore, the committee did not accept it. We had other reasons. We asked them how much money would be needed. The amount that they mentioned was something which was a fraction of the kind of investment which you see in the stock market year after year. So therefore, we felt that there was enough appetite in the Indian stock market for these companies to go back and raise this.
Raise capital.
Yes, and you will recall that the original equity structure that we had envisaged was 74% for the Indian promoter, 26% for the foreign equity, foreign partner. Now, we had also said that after 10 years, the Indian promoter will bring down his equity also to 26%.
Okay.
And the balance amount will be offloaded in the market. Now, we have come to that 10-year period. IRDA has issued guidelines for offloading. There may be issues in that guideline, which is a different matter. But it is now open for companies which have completed 10 years to go to the Indian stock market and raise capital, and for the Indian promoter to either bring down his stake or go for fresh equity.
So you want them to explore this option?
They should explore this option. This option has not been explored. And I would also like to remind you that when I had brought the original bill in 1999, it had included 49% foreign investment. Not direct investment, but we had also included FIIs and others.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, now it's quite open for the government to say that when this goes to the stock market, the FIIs will be permitted. You know, though the committee has not favored it, but isn't it open for the government? Government has changed the recommendations of the standing committees on many issues. So the government has to take a call, and the government is not taking that call.
Oh, you're saying, are you suggesting that it's open to the government to take this route, but they're not taking a call? Government
They're
is
not taking a call. Now, what can you do? That's why the main point which I'd like to make to you is, first it was the left parties. Second, it is Trinamool Congress, DMK, other coalition partners, and then the opposition. Everybody has to be blamed except the government. Sometimes, Venuji, you have to make a choice whether you want to remain in government and paralyzed or you want to quit. And you have to make that choice. You have to take that call.
Fair point, yeah.
And this government for last 8 years has refused to take that call, and they just let things drift. That's why it's called policy paralysis.
Fair point. I mean, I agree with you on this. But sir, coming to banking, in India today, more than 70% of farmers still don't have access to formal banking. Now, there is a consensus among political parties. There is legislative consensus that access should be expanded. Now, for this, you need to create more banks. You need to allow existing banks to raise more capital. And I remember you had come up with the right strategy when you were finance minister, but again, that also ran into some problems. Allowing government to reduce their stake to 33%, so that banks can raise more capital and get more autonomy while retaining public sector character. Do you think this policy is workable today, or do you think the political climate is such that it's very difficult for government to reduce stake in banks below 50%?
Let me remind you that I had introduced a bill also to that effect.
Yeah, you had introduced a bill, yeah.
Which went to the then a standing committee and remained there.
Remain there.
The standing committee, which was headed by a congressman, never returned that bill to Parliament. But be that as it may, the point is that government today feels that it has enough resources, to be able to pump in money as equity to the public sector banks. And
Doesn't have, as you said, fiscal deficit is.
I know, but
going
even
through the
then,
roof.
I mean, for instance, I read in the newspapers that government was planning to give 8,000 crore to the State Bank of India as tier 1 equity. You know, so if the government has resources, let the government finance the banks. The important thing is we have got, now we'll have Basel III norms, which are stringent about.
They'll have to raise even more capital.
They'll have to raise, and the headroom in the banks to go to the market and raise it is very limited now, because in most cases we have come down to 51%. And the policy of the present government is that we will retain our share in banks up to 51%. So 33% is history. Though I'll say that it was good then, it is relevant now. But be that as it may, you talked about financial inclusion and the fact that large parts of our population are excluded from banking. Now, what is needed is for the banks not to open branches in the metros or in the urban areas.
In rural areas.
It is necessary for the banks to go into the rural areas, because that is where the exclusion is. And in order to go into the rural areas, they need to open brick and mortar branches. They need to have banking correspondents, you know, BCs. They can have ATMs, they can have smart cards, they can have a whole lot of new devices through which they can take banking to the doorstep of the depositor, to the client. And this is the kind of progress that we need to make. Unfortunately, and our committee, when it interacts with banks, one of the main issues that we discuss is financial inclusion. And
And I remember
overall,
you had introduced Kisan cards.
Kisan credit cards,
Credit cards.
Kisan credit cards, general credit cards for
These are some of the innovations which could
yes,
help.
yes. Self-help groups. How do you link them to banking? You know, it's a very important that you can't do it individually, then you do it collectively through SHGs. Now, there are a whole lot of innovations you can make. Technology has developed in the meanwhile since I was finance minister 10 years ago, and you can use that technology, as I said, to reach the doorstep of the client,
New customers.
new customers, and include them.
So you need more innovation and
Yes,
those
yes.
kind of reforms.
Not so much new banks.
New banks, but more innovation.
Yeah.
So we'll stay with that thought, sir. And here we'll take another small break. Please don't go away. Keep watching Rajya Sabha television. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with former Finance Minister, Mr. Yashwant Sinha. So we were discussing various reforms which essentially were started during your period and still kind of hurtling and not really fructifying. Now, in this context, I would like to spend a few minutes with you discussing the goods and services tax, which everybody says is one reform which will actually give a huge boost to the economy. It will maybe reduce indirect taxes by about 8, 9, 10%. This is something that was envisaged during your period, but for various reasons, your own party, some pressures within your own party resulted in that reform not being able to be carried forward. Now, today we have a situation where there is some hope with Sushil Modi as the chairman of the Empowered Committee. Again, a system which which was started during your time, and there is some hope that with Sushil Modi there, things would move forward. Now, what is your sense? Do you think GST can be seriously be implemented, say in the next 6 months to 1 year?
I'll respond to this question, but I'd like to mention at this point that out another very important issue, and I hope you'll ask me that question, on interest rates, which is critical to the economy. On GST, yes, you are right. In fact, VAT was almost introduced when we were in office. It was notified when this government came into office. is working satisfactorily. Revenues of the states have gone up, though there was a fear that revenues may go down, and we had to think in
In fact,
terms
revenues have gone up huge.
Yes.
In Tamil Nadu, VAT is much more than other.
But we had to give the assurance to the states that we will compensate for revenue loss for the first 3 years, etc. GST, there is no doubt, is a very, very important piece of reform on the taxation side, especially indirect taxation. And the GST has been making slow progress because the center unfortunately was not able to carry conviction with the state governments. Some of the state governments, they have genuine concerns which were not met, which were not settled. In any case, now the position is that the central government has introduced a constitutional amendment. That constitutional amendment has been referred to the standing committee. We have started examination of the bill, and naturally we'll have to consult the stakeholders, and the main stakeholders in this, apart from the central government, are the state governments, the traders and the industry. So we'll be consulting with them and giving our report. But the most important thing about GST that I'd like to make, two important points I'd like to make. One is that the states must be fully on board. You mentioned about problems in our time. The problems arose because states were not fully on board, even with regard to VAT. And we have to carry conviction. And here, it is not the political color of the state government. It is the fiscal concern of the state government which counts. And I don't think the Prime Minister did any good to the GST cause by accusing Gujarat and giving a political color to this whole debate. Be that as it may, it will be my effort as the chairman of the...
You're saying that Gujarat should not have been linked to this?
Yes, should not have been linked. He did it twice, you know. But what I am saying is, it will be our endeavor in the committee to work fast on the GST and submit a report to Parliament as quickly as possible, though I must confess to you that I don't see GST being implemented in the next 12 months.
The next 12 months?
Yeah, because the report of the committee will go. I don't know how long the government will take to examine the report. Then the state governments have to frame their legislations. You know, a lot of secretarial work, preparatory work will have to be done.
Technology has to be established.
Technology has to be the tax information network, because you know set-offs have always been a problem. Giving tax credit, for instance, has been a problem. All these things will have to be. But the second point which I like to make to you is, there is nothing which prevents the central government from going ahead with a GST on its own.
Okay.
You know, we introduced SENVAT at the center.
I get your point here.
And then the states followed. So you introduce GST at the central level.
You're stressing that you do it in a piecemeal way.
You can do it at the central, as far as central tax is concerned. Center levies service tax, central is levying central excise. You merge the two and have a GST at the central level.
And then move to the states.
Then if you move to the states, then you move with conviction. We had SENVAT at the center. We had the experience of SENVAT. We had built the tax information network, and then we went to the states, and we were able to carry conviction.
I think that's a good suggestion, yeah. And so now coming back to growth, now one of the key concerns of the industry is interest rates. Do you think interest rates today are very high and they're breaking the back of industry, or was the RBI very slow in correcting or bringing down interest rates like many other countries around the world have done?
You see, when the RBI started raising interest rates, I had said then, and I repeat now, that our problem was food inflation. Now, any sectoral inflation, food or manufactured products or fuel, light, lubricants, if they rise vertically, they also spread horizontally, or laterally. Laterally, they affect other sectors. So when food inflation was going up, I said it is going to touch the other sectors.
Which it did,
Which it did, and we have the wholesale price index now, you know what has happened. So I said that if you want to tackle food inflation, it is not through monetary policy, and I am glad that many people are now saying this.
Attacking supply chain rather.
Yeah, attack the supply chain. Now, that was not done by the government. The correlation with fiscal policy was not established, and the Reserve Bank of India had no option but to go on raising rates. That ultimately did what it could. The only thing which it could do, that it started hurting investment, and it hurt investment to an extent where investment dried up and it affected growth.
But can now it should be brought down?
Now that food inflation is almost in negative territory, and now that the WPI monthly is perhaps coming down, I don't know because I have not seen the latest figures, there could be a case for the RBI to start reducing interest rates, which will send a signal to the industry. Their CRR thing was a step in the right direction in the last
It did lead to some positive sentiment.
Yes. Yes. So, what is my experience? I noticed that if you have inflation, inflation is bound to affect interest rates. We were suffering high interest rates for years, So, in order to attack interest rates, moderate interest rates, you had to moderate inflation, which is what we did. When we succeeded on that front, then gradually we reduced.
You brought down all the interest rates.
From something like 14%, we were down to about 6.5%.
Yeah, that's well recognized. That your time interest rates did come down. Yeah.
This coupled with reviving the investment sentiment, laying emphasis on infrastructure, on housing, had the desired result. That is a magic which has worked in this country. And while on this point I'd like to tell you that much more importantly than depending on external demand, Indian economy should depend on domestic demand. There is enough domestic demand to propel our economy to a double-digit growth in the coming years, provided we save enough, we invest enough, and we revive the investor sentiment.
Thank you, sir. That's all we have in this episode of State of the Economy. We'll come back with another one. Thank you. Goodbye.